Timcast IRL will be live in Miami with Patrick Bet David, Donald Trump Jr., Matt Gaetz, and Luke Rudkowski. Join us there. Get your tickets by clicking the link in the description below or by going to timcast.com. This next story from Newsweek. Joe Biden commemorating 9/11 in Alaska sparks backlash.
Isn't that where the third plane crashed?
Yeah.
The mysterious,
fifth
helicopter. Beau Biden was on it. That's how Beau Biden died.
Okay. Joe Biden did not go to New York for the 9/11 memorial. It's the first president to skip it. I think. I don't know if this is true. I saw a tweet. It said that, or an X post. I'm sorry. Said that the response was 22 years after Pearl Harbor, president stopped going to Hawaii. Is that what it was?
I saw that too.
Yeah. Okay. So I take offense to this.
I also take offense to this.
When you read the stories of 9/11, and most of us have read them to a great degree, especially the people who are watching, because some people have read too many stories about 9/11, and some people have read a healthy amount to better understand what happened, how it happened. And there's a lot of wild theories out there, but I think most of us, we've read quite a bit. And you learn about the heroism. What's the word? I can't think of the word, but shout out. I'll just say that to Jon Stewart for standing up for the 9/11 first responders who are not getting the.
Oh, he did that a lot.
Right. And it's brilliant because the men who rushed when people were running away, rightly so, there were people who ran towards knowing what they had to do, knowing that they could leave their children behind to have no father, no mother, no family, but they had to save as many people as they could. And Joe Biden wasn't even commemorating 9/11. It's unfair to say that he did. What was he doing? Where he stopped in Alaska is a typical refueling port for Air Force One. What really happened? In my opinion, he was traveling back from Southeast Asia and stopped to refuel. And they were like, well, you might as well say something about 9/11. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris went to New York instead.
That's an embarrassment. She's an embarrassment.
Yeah.
She's a horror. She should have absolutely no place near the White House ever under any circumstances.
And she typically doesn't. I mean, the Joe Biden administration does not engage with Kamala that much. She's so unpopular. She was in charge of the border. We never hear from her. So to send her in his stead is like saying that's how much we don't care about this.
Right. But also they try and get everyone to say the Biden-Harris administration. That's what the press secretary says, Biden-Harris. I refuse to allow that.
That's because we're going into an election year and they're trying to be like, no, we have a woman of color on the ticket, so we're better. It's just disgusting.
Yeah, she is absolutely horrifying.
I want to give a shout out to Spike Cohen for this tweet, which I read, and it's very difficult to read. And I pulled up the Wikipedia page for the man he wrote about, Ray Rescorla, and reading this story brings me to tears and fills me with rage at the same time that Joe Biden doesn't care. And there's arguments about, it's like, well, but he had to give the speech in Vietnam or whatever. It's like, you do not schedule things that interrupt you showing up to New York for 9/11 memorial. Whatever your thoughts about 9/11, the people posting World Trade Center 7 all day, it was trending. Regardless, the people died that day. People died afterwards. People were sickly afterwards. Dogs died. Lives were sacrificed. And this guy, Rick Rescorla, has one of the most incredible stories I've ever read. I'll give you the simple version. Security guard working the World Trade Centers is concerned about a terror attack potentially hitting the trade centers, has an assessment done. They find that there is a huge risk in the basement. A few years later, some dude tries to blow up the trade center by doing exactly what they were warned about. He gets mad. He begins these drills every 3 months saying evacuations. Why? Is he worked for Morgan Stanley as security, and they were the largest occupants of the South Tower. When 9/11 happened, the North Tower gets hit. He immediately goes to everyone, says, we practiced for this, we're getting out. But on the PA, the Port Authority said to stay at your desks. He calls his best friend and says that SOBs are telling us to stay. I'm getting my people out of here. Only, I believe, 13 of the 2,700 employees at Morgan Stanley died because this guy had a plan. He was preparing for the risks, thought ahead, and he had other people's lives in his mind, not his own. So after they evacuated people, when the first plane hit, they had 17 minutes before the South Tower was hit. He got out almost every single person, and then he went back inside, and they never saw him again. And he told his wife on the phone that, if she never sees him again, he loves her, and she gave him everything he ever wanted. And you hear stories like that, and it's not the first story we've ever heard. There's so many stories. And I hear a story like that, and I hear a story about all the first responders that Jon Stewart was defending, and this is what gets me so angry at the people who would reject. I think the 9/11 first responders should have been given $1 million a year for the rest of their lives, and so many other people in this country, considering how much wealth we have. And you hear stories like this, and you hear stories of the dudes who rushed in full speed, never to be seen again, leaving behind families, the people who are victims who died in this, the people standing at the edge of the molten steel and the burning building as it sprays out, the people who had to live for decades with damaged lungs and cancer. And the least you can do, Joe Biden, is show up. Literally, the minimum is just showing up. I'm pissed, man.
What gets me, one of the things that bothers me the most is that those people that went back into the building should be alive, because buildings like that are not supposed to fall down from office fires.
And that's what they thought.
They all thought it.
The firefighters knew going in.
They knew.
Their risk was burning, smoke, chemicals. There's potential for explosions if there's gas stored somewhere. Not the building would collapse on everybody.
They all knew the buildings would stay up. That's why they went in.
They believed.
Yep.
They believed.
Funny how knowledge can change like that.
Well, it's amazing too how fragile civilization is. How it can just, crumble. Everything you can believe about it. You can believe that the, steel I-beams are going to stay forever, but it's all just going to crumble.
Yeah.
And it crumbles quickly. I feel like our civilization is crumbling rather quickly at this point. We built it up so high, it was so big, and now it's just like crumbling. When I see stories like this, though, what an amazing and incredible man to do this, to know, to not worry about what the authorities are saying, to know himself what's important and to go for that. So often now people just believe what they're told, and there's no reason to believe what you're told. You have to think for yourself in every single circumstance. And it's just like clear, the more things that come up that it turns out we can't trust what we are told. And there was so much we were told that we believed,
Well, and we see so many examples of people who are given jobs to protect other people failing. I mean, I think about the Uvalde school shooting when the school resource officer wasn't there. And then this guy is like, I am the head of security and I am going to take it so seriously
we needed this guy at Uvalde.
We need him everywhere.
Right.
And it's interesting because
who wants to read that quote?
I can read it. I will get emotional reading this, but he called his wife Susan and said, "Stop crying. I have to get these people out safely. If something should happen to me, I want you to know I've never been happier. You made my life." And I think that's so crazy that like this man was on the phone with his wife. It would have been so easy to be like, I got a bunch of people out. I'm going to run up the street. And he said like, I am going back.
I'm on my way home.
Yeah. I mean, how much do you think you wanted to be with his wife in those last moments, right? And even this is like, he's Welsh, and I find this like to be very like UK to me, this idea that his wife is on the phone. She knows what's about to happen. She knows it's a risk. And his response is, stop crying. Like, we have a job to do and we're going to do it.
And think about our current generation. Think about the people we have today. Uvalde. Man.
There was a post also from Ryan Godursky talking about his uncle.
Yeah, that was really powerful.
Which was really powerful. His uncle Pete, who was going in, he thought his niece was in the building and he kept going in to try and get her out. And
it turned out she wasn't even there that day.
It turns out she wasn't even there, but he kept going in and finding somebody else and bringing them out. And then he'd go back in and he'd find somebody else and he just kept going back in to bring people out. And I remember that day, because I was in Philadelphia. I wasn't even in New York.
And it was your birthday.
And it was my birthday. But, New York is where my grandparents were born. My mother was born in New York. Eventually my son was born in New York. But I remember watching Rudy Giuliani on TV, because what happened was everyone wanted news out of New York. So all the channels in Jersey and Philadelphia just tuned into like the New York local news, like New York One, right? So we were all just watching New York One, and Rudy Giuliani came on and he started talking about it and what was going down, and he started talking about how alternate side of the street parking would be suspended. So for those of you who are not super familiar with parking in New York, they clean the streets, and so every couple of days you got to move your car to the other side of the street so they can clean the street. And Giuliani started talking about alternate side of the street parking would be suspended. And I was like super emotional feeling. I was like, New York is still New York. Rudy Giuliani's in charge. He's gonna save the city again, and he did. in a lot of ways. But yeah, the people who did that, and later talking to my boss, I worked for this architecture company, and my boss was telling me his kids went to school downtown, and he lived in Brooklyn, and he walked across the bridge. Everyone's like running across the bridge trying to get to Brooklyn. Everyone's like fleeing downtown, and he's walking the other way to go get it, to like go find his kids, and his kids were okay, and he found them. Another person I know just was like, ended up writing a one-man show called Walk North, and he had been downtown, and he just started like walking north, and like, you know, everybody he ran into, people just being like, does anyone need a bathroom? You could come to my apartment. Does anyone need water? Like, what does anybody need, you know?
Yeah.
My buddy was walking north that morning after the planes hit, similar situation to get uptown. And then people were screaming that there was another plane coming, and they all just thought that it was. No one knew what was happening, that we were under attack from all angles. They would scream, panicked, and run into buildings and hide and stuff like that. No other planes ever came.
After the second plane hit, everything changed. When the first plane hit, it was this an accident?
Right. That's what I thought first. Yeah.
Some like, wow, what could have happened? The low visibility, who knows? And then the second plane hit, and it was clear. And the stories I heard from some people, just similar to what you were saying, no, the day was not over. I mean, World Trade Center 7 collapsed at what, 5 p.m. that day?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. So, I mean, if you're in New York, and after, you know, it's 10 a.m. and all this is going down, and then later on in the day, all of a sudden another building just collapses, shattering in the middle and just falling straight down without even being hit by a plane. Who knows? Any building could have just fallen down.
Could happen.
That was like you said earlier, how fragile things are in life and things. And I believe that, but I also believe that steel skyscrapers are not fragile, and that yes, life is fragile, but life can also be destroyed by outside forces if you're not paying attention. And just like the United States was taken over in 1913 by this Federal Reservist corporate fascist system, I feel like our buildings were blown up. Dude, World Trade Center 7 does not just fall down on its own unless its structures are blown out. Who blew out the supports? Why didn't World Trade Center 1 and 2 fall near free fall? Who blew out the supports?
Well, the city also changed the way that buildings were inspected. So my grandfather was an engineer, and he would like inspect buildings. And the way that he used to inspect buildings, he would go up inside buildings and he would check it out. He would look at everything. He would, you know, see everything he could possibly see. He would go up into all the different nooks and crannies of the buildings and figure out what was going on with it. And the city changed the rules of how you inspect buildings so that no longer did you have to go up into the building, but you could just stand in a building somewhere else with a telescope and look at the building from there and look at it that way. And my grandfather was just like, this is ridiculous. This is not how we fix buildings. And he was going up into buildings being like, I can see from here that gargoyle is going to fall off of, you know, whatever. He was like going up into the Chrysler building and all this stuff, looking at it from all the angles, being like, this is how you got to fix your building. Your building is in danger. But they changed the way that they looked at the buildings. They changed the inspection methods.
And they made it worse.
They made it substantially worse.
When did they do that?
I don't remember exactly. I knew you were going to ask me, and I decided to tell you the anecdote about my grandfather anyway, just because it says sweetheart. But I know that they did change it, and they changed it substantially long enough ago.
I think there's a simple truth. The government did not tell you the truth about what happened on 9/11, and I don't care what the media writes about me. They're morons. If you think the United States government being attacked or whatever you think happened is going, let's operate under the assumption that everything about they said is true. That would mean that the U.S. government revealed to the world, quite literally, how the Pentagon got attacked. Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
They're
Come
not
on.
going to do it.
They'll tell you what they can tell you, but there's a thing called classified and top secret. And if you think that after we got attacked on 9/11, the government was like, here's all of the secrets about what happened. Oh, come on. So, you know, it's funny when Vivek Ramaswamy says we're learning now about, the Saudi involvement or whatever, and they try to make him look like a conspiracy theorist. You really think that the government just declassified literally everything? No, there's probably a bunch of documents that even Trump knows. And he was like, oh, wow, didn't know that happened, but they're not going to tell you.
I remember at the time, because after 9/11, the rents went down in New York. And I was like, oh, as soon as I get a job in New York, I'm moving to New York, which is what I did. But I remember then it was the Patriot Act, which is, of course, one of the most egregious violations of American civil liberties in the history of a country, and it's still in effect. It's basically warrantless surveillance of Americans. What they did in reaction to a global, a threat from outside of the country is they decided to surveil Americans more, and now we have the DOJ that says the biggest threat in the United States is domestic terrorism.
Yep. That's crazy.
It's crazy. And it started with the Patriot Act. And I remember my theater group, we started doing protest pieces about the Patriot Act that were like, wiretapped phone conversations from the Oval Office, like making fun of George Bush, because of course we hated him. And then it was March 2003, George Bush founded the Department of Homeland Security, which now has like some 240,000 employees. It's a huge department. They're dismantling the border with their huge department. But he launched that on March 1st, 2003. And then March 19th was the invasion of Iraq. And I remember like being like, we're invading Iraq? This was Saudi. Like, we're invading Iraq. What are we doing? Why is this even happening? And then we go into Afghanistan, which again, any student of history can tell you, it's a really bad idea to go try and fight a war in Afghanistan. That never works out for anybody. Like, that just never works out. Why are we doing that? And then Obama was like, oh, I want to be president. I'm going to put more money into Afghanistan. And I was like, well, I can't vote for you. You're a warmongering crazy person. Like, we obviously can't do this. And we just kept going right down this road. We learned absolutely nothing, unless that was the plan all along, was to create a, domestic surveillance state where we just fund wars to line the pockets of presidents.
Probably. I think that was good. American like free speech and stuff. It's okay, but if you're a rich corporatist, it doesn't really matter. Like, you don't have free speech in your corporation. You run the show.
Right.
So if someone pisses you off, they're gone. And I don't think this idea of like you can say whatever you want is even like jives with his global banking. I don't know who blew up those buildings, who lined explosives that blew the supports out on 1 and 2. I don't know. And to hear that there were Saudis involved, but that wasn't in the mainstream is freakish. How deep do you want to go? There's nanothermite in the dust.
Let's go crazy on the members only show. We'll go absolutely just off the rails as far as we can go. But I want to keep it a bit more topical, because we have this story from the Post Millennial. Biden said he was at ground zero on the day after 9/11. Congressional records show he was on the Senate floor. I utterly despise this man
He is the worst. He is so awful. It's amazing how bad and awful he is.
Now
he's a liar. He's committed bribery.
Here's the post. Here's the quote. Ground zero, New York. I remember standing there the next day and looking at the building. I felt like I was looking at the gates of hell. It looked so devastating. Here's him on the Senate floor on 9/12 at 1:45 p.m.
Now let's play a game. Do you think it's lying, or do you think it's dementia? Do you think he doesn't know and he's trying to fabricate?
I think it's a little bit of both. Yeah, for sure. Both?
Isn't that crazy?
For sure. Nature versus nurture. Well, it's both.
Do you think he's just surrounded by people who are like, yeah, tell that story. Sounds good, man.
No.
Back in the day, when he was young, when there was no internet and you couldn't pull up the videos, he could say anything.
Did he go there within like 3 weeks after?
There was his Senate delegation on September 20th.
So he was like the next day. In his mind, he's like, oh, what does it matter? I said the next day. It was the next week. It's the same thing.
It was the next 2 weeks. Yeah, I don't know if he was there. I don't know if he was part of that thing.
Then dementia makes more sense.
Yeah.
And also it's more interesting if he's been lying his entire career, which of course we know he has.
Wait,
so his
does
dementia
that not have both clips in it? Can you just scroll down?
Both clips? Just the one?
What the hell?
There's a link to the Twitter.
You see, Libby, when we're using the Post Millennial, and then we give a shout out to you. But here's what's interesting is that, we just had the other day Kamala Harris saying she's ready to take over. And then,
but why would she need to tell us that?
But then she's the one at the 9/11 memorial and Joe Biden ain't here.
Yeah.
Why? Because maybe he can't stay awake long enough.
Well, he did say, I couldn't meet with the Chinese president because I have to go to bed or something like that.
Oh, wow.
They were like talking about he avoided the question by like joking, loose mainstream terms there for.
And Gavin Newsom said he's not going to run because Kamala Harris is next in line. But that doesn't mean anything, right? Like, He says that now and everyone's like, see, look, he's respecting the office. But then, Kamala Harris.
He would run if he could do it.
A fast food restaurant and then quits. Who knows?
She gets a job in academia where everyone who burns out in politics
Supreme
goes.
Court.
No, we talked about the possibility. I think what's crazy about the Joe Biden ground zero thing is, first off, open lie that anyone could fact check. Also, when Trump has told a story about, watching the towers fly in, like, the planes flying into the towers from his apartment. And I pulled it today. The Washington Post had this big fact checking. Well, he said he told a story here, and then he said he used a telescope, and then he did whatever. Like, but no one is going to issue a correction other than, you know, respectful people at the Post Millennial, right? Like, what is this that everyone can pretend like Joe Biden is just saying the truth all the time? But anything Trump does, they are willing to tear down.
And it's right there on C-SPAN.
There's a photo of Trump on the ground afterwards during like recovery efforts. And then there's a fact check where it's like, he did not go down to 9/11 and I was like, what?
But he's literally there.
They use technicalities to be like, this is what they always do. They say, did Donald Trump go down to the World Trade Center wreckage to help recover on Sunday?
At 3:15?
It was Monday. You're right. No, false.
It was Monday at 4.
It was actually Sunday at 3:17.
Right. It was Tuesday.
It was Tuesday.
Right.
Did you see the video of him being like, who set the bombs? There were bombs that went off. Who set
Trump
the bombs?
said that?
Yeah, he's
When? In 20...
Like the day after. Like he's down at the wreck. He's like, I've got 100 guys in there working right now. I'm headed in to give him moral support. I want to know. And it's different clips of him being like, there were bombs. There are firemen who were like, bombs went off. Boom, 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 boom. And then the building just comes down. Trump knew. He was there. He's like, what? These steel skyscrapers do not just fall out of office fires.
Well, we'll talk about that in the members only.
We sure will.
We'll go nuts.
I think one of the craziest things, and I think Trump is representational of this, because when he talks about 9/11, he talks about it with, you know, a gravity that we're obviously not seeing from Joe Biden, right? I mean, Joe Biden...
It's Trump's hometown.
It's Trump's hometown. He feels it really deeply. And I think it reminds me of, because I grew up in Connecticut, so, you know, we did, like, everyone got bused home from school. It was a big deal. I was very young, so, like, I don't have all the clearest memories of it, but... you know, for years, especially growing up in this region, you know, people who have stories are like, oh yeah, my dad was supposed to have a meeting there that day and then he didn't, or like my mom did this, that, and the other, and you know, whatever, you know, people who are affected by it. The one that I think of the most is someone I knew had a son who was in high school at the time, and they could see the buildings coming down from his high school, and he was staying there with a classmate, and the family friend's son is Catholic. So he said a prayer and then he crossed himself. And his friend was like, went home to his dad and said, you know, I wish we had something like that, because I in moments of these complete terror, how does anyone respond? And I wish I had a way to just like express how I was feeling. And I find this really interesting because rather than acknowledge the gravity of the situation and the fact that so many people had this moment where they thought, are we going to be okay, we collectively, to then decide like Trump is wrong because he didn't go down when we said he did. Meanwhile, it's okay for Biden to say, well, after 20 years, I've decided it's not worth remembering this. I mean, this impacted people so profoundly that maybe he should have just been honest and been like, yeah, we had to refuel on the way home from Asia. I couldn't make it. But even then, it seems crazy.
He should have come home yesterday.
You get to the point where the generation you're targeting with votes don't remember. So it's not just people who were born in 2001 or after. It's the people who were born in 1997.
Who don't remember. I remember after my mother was a securities lawyer. She's retired. But I remember after this day, I saw her a little while later cleaning out her Rolodex. We used to have this thing. It was called a Rolodex. You'd put phone numbers in it on paper. Yeah. And there would be a hole in it. And it would be like a loose leaf binder.
Yep, you go through
if anyone knows what that is.
That's
anyway,
crazy.
She was literally tearing names out of her Rolodex. People who had not only died, but anyone who had an office in the trade center, because that was also useless. That was their work number and work address.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was a very chilling moment for me. And I was like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "None of these people work here anymore, and some of them are not alive." And I was like, "Okay."
Wow.
Which is great. The fact that she could spend an afternoon doing that.
Wasn't it like Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be on one of the planes?
Oh,
I think that's the story.
That's wild.
I don't know for sure.
Yeah, and then something happened.
Yeah.
He got a call from Mayor Willie Brown or something? No, I'm kidding.
Really?
No, Willie Brown apparently said he got a phone call or something like that. Well, I will say we're gonna go ham on the members only. We're gonna go ham. Where we can, because we got a bunch of other news stories. So I want to keep it topical.
Yeah, it says he missed by about 10 minutes. Missed flight 11. He and Mark Wahlberg were supposed to.
Mark Wahlberg. That's the one I was thinking of. That's
crazy.
There are children who are growing up having never been without TSA. Like,
yeah, you know, they
never traveled before that. Like
that's crazy.
It doesn't make any sense, but at the same time, 20 years is a really long time. There are kids born after 9/11 who only know about life under the patriarch with these intense security measures.
But I never flew before TSA.
Do you know, when I was a kid, my dad lived in Boston, and I grew up and I lived with my dad, and my mom lived in New York. She lived 165 West 66th Street, and I used to fly back and forth on the Eastern Airlines shuttle. Eastern also doesn't exist. I am so old, you guys. Anyway, I used to fly back and forth between my parents, and my dad would at Logan Airport, he would walk me to the gate and see me off. And sometimes he would walk me onto the plane. And
in movies, the people are waiting outside the gate, like, yay, with signs
and I used to have
stuff.
it, and my mom would be like right outside the plane when I got off the plane. She would be right there. Mm-hmm. And then there was this weird time when all the unaccompanied minors got lost by the airlines, and that was really weird. For hours. No one knew where. And I remember being in a big room at an airport with hundreds of kids.
Yeah.
Just all of us sitting there.
When,
airports hate unaccompanied minors now.
I worked at O'Hare when I was 18 until I was 20. And so this is just 4 years, after 9/11. And I talked to the guys who worked there who had been there when it happened. And they said, this is what I was told by a handful of guys, that after it happened, within, 15 or so minutes, there were guys in suits with rifles standing on the tarmac. And
that's nuts.
Yeah. They were like,
how'd they get there so
weapons.
fast?
Well, there's
They're there anyway.
serious law enforcement at airports. So when they were like, we have a terror attack happening, the airports send out the dudes to go on lockdown. And they were like, there were men with guns standing outside on the tarmac, looking around, keeping everyone away, trying to figure out what's going on.
I was in New York just a week later or so after 9/11, and there were guys just standing on street corners, army guys in Greenwich Village with huge guns. And I remember just being terrified. There's crazy army guys standing here with guns all down in the West Village. That's nuts.
I worked there. I moved to New York September 5th. 6 days later, they came down the buildings, and then I started working
messed up.
Ground Zero October 13th or something. A month later, I started working there. It was all militarized. It was like devastation. Kind of windows were blown out and the buildings all nearby. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was like, well, I guess that's what happens when buildings fall down. I didn't consider the projectile force from the bombs going off on blowing out the supports. Apparently, that's why shit went flying out the sides of the building.
According to the official report, the pressure from the pancaking effect forcing air out the windows.
They got you. The official report, NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology.
So you remember all
NIST does not explain
all the portable phones that they just set up and parked. You remember that?
I never used one.
No, but they were there.
I don't know if the NIST report discussed World Trade Center 7, did it?
Yeah, I think it did, but I haven't read much about that.
I don't know if the NIST report does.
They talk about how the Building 7 pancaked and then fell.
No.
They give some half...
No, you're talking about Building 1 and 2. I'm saying World Trade Center 7 was where the propane tanks exploded after fires got out of control, causing it to crumble.
It was propane that blew up the entire
something like that. I'm saying the official statement on World Trade Center 7, I believe, is debris from Trade Centers 1 and 2 caused fires in World Trade Center 7, which burned out of control.
So funny.
Because of the chaos and limited resource. There's no firefighters, resulting in stored gas tanks bursting or something like that.
Right.
Which then started weakening various portions of the building, causing it to just crumple and then fall.
Yeah, there's a digital simulation of the building crumpling, and they only show, the National Institute of Standards and Technology only show a portion of the fall. But then it doesn't really explain why it fell in near free fall.
We're going to get into all that at the members only. So go to timcast.com, click join us, become a member. And then in 1 hour, we're going to have a very interesting conversation, I imagine, about unofficial beliefs. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.